Welcome back to the channel, and welcome once again to an in-depth guitar review. I've really been looking forward to producing this video for you guys, because this time around we are looking at a type of guitar that I've never featured on the channel before, and it's a type of guitar that I haven't ever bought before either. I've never been much of a single cut Les Paul kind of guy. I don't have anything against this type of guitar, but something just about the weight or the ergonomics, the neck profile, the scale length. I've played a many over my years from Gibson and Epiphone, and I've never really found myself liking them that much. I can't put my finger on any one particular reason, other than to say that the ergonomics of them I've just never felt sit very right with me. I have really long fingers and big hands, and the kind of clubby neck profile where the strings are quite close together, paired with the 24.75 scale length that is standard across most Les Paul guitars, just leaves me with this kind of cramped feeling when I'm trying to navigate my way across the fretboard. This is probably the reason I find myself most comfortable on a 7-string guitar. Something about that 7-string neck just folds really comfortably into my hand. Now, having said all of that, I really take a lot of pleasure in stepping outside my comfort zone, musically and when it comes to doing videos for you guys. So I really enjoy reviewing gear that I wouldn't otherwise bother to try, because sometimes I've just found myself really surprised with how much I enjoy certain things that have come up that I've reviewed on this channel. And to kind of spoil the outcome of this review slightly, I have had such a good time playing this guitar that I really am considering keeping it as a staple in my collection now. I know that the single cut Les Paul shape is one of the most popular guitar shapes in the world, and maybe I've been missing out on something. So this particular model is the ESP LTD EC1000 Deluxe. This is finished in a color called Blue Fade, which I think is kind of selling it a little bit short in terms of a description. Now, this is a poplar burl top over a mahogany body, and the finish is something like an approximation of kind of a Caribbean beach, I would say. You have a deep, deep blue color fading into almost like a sandy kind of gold color around the neck pickup. It looks absolutely stunning. Obviously, burl tops can vary, so the knots in the wood, they aren't always going to match up on each version you get, but this one in particular, the finish I have no issues really with at all. I think it just looks fantastic. It pretty much looks even better in person than it does in pictures. The rear of the guitar is just finished in kind of a uniform blue color, but you do have a transparency to the finish, so the knotting of the wood is visible. We have a proper Tone Pros string through bridge arrangement, a very traditional setup for a Les Paul guitar. The usual 3 control pot setup here, but we do have the addition of a push-pull coil split for these pickups. The pickups themselves are a Seymour Duncan, Pegasus and Sentient set. I have never played through this particular set of Seymour Duncan pickups, so not only is this guitar something completely out of my comfort zone, but these pickups are totally new to me as well. Moving on to the neck, we have a Mikasa ebony fingerboard, and we have extra jumbo stainless steel frets. The headstock, you have a nice set of LTD locking machine heads, which are twinned with the traditional Gibson style tuning pegs. So in terms of the machine heads on this guitar, you're getting a really nice kind of trade-off between a modern appointment like locking and then also the design of a traditional kind of tuning peg that you've seen many times on like a Les Paul style guitar. Now this guitar is about 2 years old now. This first debuted in 2020, and at the moment this guitar is now going for around the £840 mark. So at its current price point, I think this guitar represents a real value proposition, especially when you consider that the competition at this same price point, none of them are offering a comparable spec with proper aftermarket branded pickups, stainless steel frets, a stunning fade burl top finish. You know, I really think this is one of the best bang for buck single cut type guitars that you can buy at the moment, at least on paper. If you look at the closest equivalent from Gibson, you'll be looking at the Gibson Les Paul Tribute, which is currently £1,000. You do get made in USA, whereas this is made in Indonesia with that guitar. However, you're not going to get things like stainless steel frets, you're not going to get Seymour Duncan pickups, although you will get Gibson's own branded pickups, which are supposed to be very, very good. The omission of any case and gig bag aside, I really do think that if you stack this up against what you might be able to get from Gibson and at the high end of Epiphone, this is, at least in terms of specs, as good as anything else out there at this price point, if not better. But as we know on this channel, specs are only ever half of the story. The rest of the story unfolds when you actually pick the thing up and start using it. So how does this thing stack up in terms of build quality? Well, I'm going to start down here at the body and I'm going to work my way all the way up to the end of the guitar at the headstock. Now, the body of the guitar is 95% flawless when it comes to build quality. The quality of the toggle switch, it's nicely damped, it's not wiggly in any way. There is absolutely no movement in this toggle switch at all. Really nice to see. The pots, they feel very nicely damped. The push-pull is nice. None of the pots drag against the body or anything like that. The bridge, being a Tone Pros item, functions exceptionally well. I have made some small adjustments to the intonation on this and everything just works perfectly with that bridge. The only build defects that I've been able to identify on the body of this guitar is just a slight error in the triple binding that goes around the edge of the guitar, pictured here. In my opinion, something like this is kind of acceptable at this price point. When you are shopping kind of below the £1,000 price point with a guitar, you are not going to get the kind of attention to detail and perfection in all the small little details that you are going to get with something like a custom shot guitar or something that's £2,000 and above but produced in a mass factory like, say, ESP in Japan. So whilst this error in the binding is definitely worth pointing out, I don't feel like it's anything that is like a deal breaker considering the specs and the rest of the package you're getting with this guitar. Moving on to the neck and these stainless steel frets. Before I shot this video a couple of weeks ago, the last guitar I reviewed was the Harley Benton Fusion 3. And those of you who have watched that video on my channel will know that I just had a horrendous time with the frets on that guitar. They were stainless steel, but my God, they were rough. They were like sandpaper, and out of the box, they were just noisy and really unpleasant to bend over. Now, picking up this guitar and playing some lead stuff on it was just a breath of fresh air. This is how a set of stainless steel frets should be coming to you. Not only do they look really nice, they're shiny as hell because they've obviously been polished up, but they feel just fantastic under the hand. There's zero noise bending on these. The string freely moves over these no matter how much bending you're doing with no resistance, no noise at all. There is no sharp edges to be found on any of these frets up and down the neck. There is a nicely rounded shoulder on each and every one as well. Now, I've played probably half a dozen LTD guitars in the past couple of years, and I have to say, whoever they have in charge of frets at the manufacturing end is just doing a bang up job and should get a pay raise. Because every single LTD guitar I have played out of Indonesia or Korea has just been exemplary in terms of fretwork. Now we arrive at the headstock and what is effectively my only genuine gripe with the build of this instrument. The nut on this guitar is what ESP lists as a molded nut. Whenever you see a guitar that is advertised as having a molded nut, that just means it's plastic. Now, those of you who view the channel, we have had many discussions in the comment sections of my videos about how much we dislike plastic nuts. There is a very good reason why plastic nuts are so universally disliked by guitarists, and it's really simple. In most cases, your tuning stability with a plastic nut will be just horrendous. The whole point of a nut is to allow the strings to move freely through it. So whether you're pulling on the string by bending or you're just playing it normally, there will always be an amount that that string will have to move through that slot of the nut. The problem with plastic is that there is way more potential for the string to get caught and to not be able to move. What you will find is that instead of the guitar slowly going out of tune in a kind of linear and predictable fashion, all of a sudden the string will drop a tone or a semitone just like that out of nowhere. And this is something that can really catch you off guard if you are on stage, if you're recording, or even if you're just at home jamming and having a good time. I have reviewed on this channel guitars around the £500 price point that have come with proper Graphtec nuts, graphite nuts, tusk nuts. So it's very disappointing to see a molded plastic nut on a guitar at this price point. Now, having said all of that, I haven't actually had a bad experience really playing this guitar with this nut installed. Maybe only once or twice have I been playing and all of a sudden a string has just dropped a whole tone and I've been caught off guard. So it appears that this is a well executed plastic nut, but really for the price point of this guitar, it shouldn't even be there in the first place. Ergonomically speaking, this is ESP's own take on the single cut design. So it's really similar to an Epiphone Les Paul. Like, you could almost be fooled to thinking it was exactly the same really in your hand, except for the fact that the single cut is just a little bit sharper in the way it's styled. Now, the intention with this particular shape from ESP is that it's an approximation of a single cut Les Paul style guitar, but it is thinner than something you would get from Epiphone or Gibson. Now, that said, it is thinner, but it still is quite heavy, this thing. It's certainly not as much of a shoulder crusher as a proper Gibson Les Paul would be, or even some of the Epiphone ones I've tried. But it's just worth bearing in mind that despite the fact that this is thinner, it does have a nice belly carve on the reverse of it. You still are getting a substantial chunk of wood for your money. And I guess when you think about the fact that this is a mahogany neck, mahogany body with a poplar burl top, I guess it's not surprising. Mahogany is one of the densest woods that guitars are made out of. Now, in terms of neck profile, it's advertised as being a kind of thin C shape, like ESP's own take on the kind of classic Les Paul design. It does still feel like a Les Paul neck, it's just slightly thinner. So any of you guys who are familiar with the Epiphone and Gibson offerings, if you are coming to this guitar, you should feel right at home really, because I found that the string spacing, it's all fairly consistent with what I've come to expect from a standard kind of single cut guitar. Now, how does this thing sound? Well, as I mentioned, this guitar is fitted with the Seymour Duncan Sentient and Pegasus set of pickups, which I've never experienced before. I've played through the Seymour Duncan Nazgul before in the bridge position, which was a really cool, like, honky pickup for kind of extreme metal. I have to say that this is just an incredibly balanced set of pickups. And what I mean by that is They are just so kind of sonically neutral and pleasing sounding. There really isn't any overly boosted frequencies or any kind of overly harsh compression or anything like that. Because of that, they're just so pleasing to the ear. Now for this review, our good friends over at Tone Wars have been kind enough to supply me with a couple of their Kemper profiles from their new Extreme Brutality pack. For the heavy sounds in this video, I've been using an EVH Stealth profile, one of the rhythm settings in that particular Kemper pack. I have done nothing to this Kemper profile other than add some delay to it. I haven't touched any of the EQ, none of the settings. I've dragged and dropped it into my Kemper, added delay, that's it. And it just sounds tremendous. Far and away, this is one of the best sounding guitars I have reviewed in a long time. There is a huge amount of just sustain and resonance with this guitar. I don't know if it is because it's just a big old slab of mahogany, but notes can just ring out on this thing for what feels like days. For anything rock or heavy metal related, you are going to be so pleased with the sounds you're getting out of this thing. And when it comes to the neck pickup, it has a real sweet high-end roll-off. There's no harshness in there at all. So whether you are soloing with the neck pickup or you're using it for clean-up tones, there really isn't anything sonically offensive in there. There's just a real nice, sweet-sounding pickup. There is quite a big drop in volume when you're engaging the coil split. This is normal with any kind of coil split optional pickups. There's always going to be a volume drop, but the volume drop on this seems to be particularly high. So whilst the tones are still very, very nice and pleasing when you're using the coil split, you're really going to have to be aware of the drop in volume if you're using this live. So, minor complaints around the nut choice aside, I feel like this is a fantastic package for anybody who is looking for a single cut Les Paul style guitar. Yes, the specs do look very good on paper, but I'm really pleased to say that once this instrument did land in my hands, I have had such a good time playing it. Just something about the way this thing resonates and sustains is just so addictive to play through. And maybe, just maybe, I've been missing out by not playing Les Paul style guitars for the past 10 years. Fellow EC1000 users and owners out there, I would love to hear what your experiences have been of this particular brand of guitar. Is there any particular single cut Les Paul models you would like to see reviewed on the channel? If there are, let me know in the comments section below. Thank you so much once again for tuning in to one of my videos. If you did enjoy this review or found it useful, please think about chucking me a subscribe because it helps me and encourages me to keep making content for you. Better yet, you can further support me via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Until the next video, take care of yourselves and I'll see you soon.